Okay, Win editor Tristan Warner here, joined by very special guest Rich Bender, the executive director of USA Wrestling. Rich and the USA Wrestling organization as a whole has been named the recipient of the 2026 Win Magazine Mike Chapman Impact of the Year Award. This award goes annually to any individual, group, or organization that makes a huge influence on the sport of wrestling from year to year. And you know, USA Wrestling obviously is making a huge impact on the sport every year. But Rich, we'll get into some of the details here in a minute as to why we really felt this year, perhaps more than ever, your guys' presence and influence was really felt palpably on a national and international level. But before we get into all that, just you're probably coming down after the U.S. Open. Talk a little bit about where you guys are at right now and how it feels to be recognized for this honor.
Well, first and foremost, thank you, and man, really a humbling recognition. Certainly, I'm accepting this not on behalf of Rich Bender, but certainly on behalf of USA Wrestling. And man, so honored to be recognized and accept an award that has Mike Chapman's name on it. As I think everyone knows, Mike Chapman was one of our founding fathers, if you will. One of the very, very early supporters of USA Wrestling, and somebody that has invested a lifetime and cares deeply about our sport. So to have USA Wrestling associated with Mike Chapman's an honor, and certainly we're humbled by the award and grateful for the support. But I said I don't accept this on behalf of Rich Bender for sure, and even from a USA Wrestling perspective. I mean, the organization is so blessed to have an infrastructure that literally involves tens of thousands of people that lean in every day to help elevate our sport, to help provide quality wrestling opportunities for America's youth to experience the greatest sport we've ever known. So, man, we're honored and humbled, and busy time, as you said. Just coming off a massive U.S. Open, almost 6,000 entries. I think we wrestled close to 12,000 matches last week in Las Vegas, and just a great showcase for wrestling. And I know that some think there's too much there, and we had a staff meeting earlier in the week talking about that, and certainly USA Wrestling has the perspective of how do we continue to build infrastructure to continue to build more opportunities, not less. And so, there's a lot of challenges around running a 6,000 entry wrestling tournament. But man, we look back on last week and know for sure that literally thousands of lives were changed, due in large part the opportunity of mixing America's youth wrestling with our elite. And we're grateful to our national team athletes and those senior athletes that stop and take the time to sign an autograph, or as they're warming up, maybe be inconvenienced a little, but the impact that has on the sport is monumental. We went around the room in our staff meeting, and it was literally many examples of guys like Bill Zadek or Cody Bickley that wrestled in that tournament as a youth, and remember, and Cody said he just remembers wrestling in Las Vegas and as a youth, and seeing Bruce Baumgarten and noticing how big his calves were. And so, but it's just, we're passionate about that. We're bullish about growing opportunities, not limiting them. And certainly there's infrastructure that has to be built, right? We have to have the support around it. Referees are pretty heavily taxed, and we got to continue to look for ways to provide more opportunities for referees to have the experience needed prior to that. So we have high level refereeing, and it's not that's not something that goes away because we're doing this tournament. But for me, it's the one of the most enjoyable weeks of the year to see so many people, and and it's in a lot of ways that event is a kind of a glimpse into what's coming for LA. So really cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say earlier this year I wrote an article about having been at Super 32 and being at Fargo, it's almost like a massive family reunion that you actually want to go to. You just see so many people and so many people that you recognize or know who they are. But I think this being my first time being at the senior level U.S. Open, I wrestled at like the U20s and all that back when they were separate. But I think this one takes the cake in terms of you can't take 10 steps without bumping into someone you know or someone you recognize or some legendary wrestler. It's just standing there. It's insane. So yeah, incredible event. It was awesome to be out there and witness all of that. So kudos to you and your staff for putting on another legendary event with record numbers across the board. And I even saw the Masters division is taking off. I was considering wrestling in it back in the fall. Didn't really end up training as much as I probably should have, so I didn't. But in the future, I might. I just couldn't believe to see how years ago that tournament wasn't quite as popular, the numbers weren't as big, and this year I'm looking at 32-man brackets in the Masters, so it's just absolutely insane. But yeah, wanting to segue, you talked about the youth development, and that's really a big chunk of what we're going to be looking at here and talking about today, is just that when you look at what was the storyline of the 2025-26 wrestling season? On the college level, people would probably say the year of the freshman. There's just an incredible amount of accomplishments from guys who are first year in college or redshirt freshmen doing things that the sport hasn't really seen before. And when we really got to thinking about that, that's really honestly a huge compliment to USA Wrestling, just based on the age level system and how good these kids are already coming out of high school and already ready to compete for NCAA titles. And we're even seeing guys like Bo Bassett and Jax Forrest and PJ Duke, making potentially senior world teams or making a splash on the senior level when they're 18, 19 years old. So I wanted to talk to you about just, how have you guys been able to see that development in the last decade or so, where it just seems like, there's always been kids that are really good when they're 18 or 19, but to see this level and to see it be almost like not a crazy, thing, what PJ Duke and Jackson Bo are doing. Talk a little bit about just that development process from the young ages and the age level system.
Well, Tristan, I'd be really remiss if I didn't say, the regional training centers are the most responsible for those elite kids developing so early. And, we talk a lot about the regional training centers, and grateful for the commitment that not just college coaches. There's other regional training centers around the country that aren't on college campuses, but, bulk of them are around college programs. But that's been the reason. These young athletes now are exposed to the best coaches, the best training partners, the best facilities in the country. And in the past, that it was those kids only had those opportunities, or young athletes only had those opportunities if they were in a elite high school program or a situation where they had some exceptional resources. To where now, with the regional training centers, it provides opportunity for those kids to get really good really fast. And it's also cool to see the significance put on age group, continental and world teams at an earlier age. And I've been around almost 40 years, and when we first started here at USA Wrestling, that it wasn't such a big deal to make a U17 world team or a S-ball world team back in the day, or junior world team. And man, it's a big deal now for the very best kids in the country, and those kids are all incredibly proficient in freestyle at an earlier age. But it's due in large part for, I'm obviously grateful for those elite coaches out there that are providing some pretty unbelievable opportunities for America's youth. But to be able to get into college rooms and work with the very best, in a lot of cases Olympians and Olympic level coaches and world class facilities, it's I can't think of many things in last couple of decades that have had more of an impact on the sport than the regional training center model. And we talk about the American development model, and certainly regional training centers are a part of that. But we're seeing the I guess the fruits of the labor, if you will, of people investing in these kids early, and seeing them flourish. And the regional training center benefits really three groups. It benefits obviously the Olympic athletes, those elite athletes that are training to win World Olympic medals, in most cases postgraduate, or a lot of them postgraduate, and earning, in a lot of cases, a livable wage to be around these, in most cases, college programs to train. Obviously, the student athletes that are enrolled in these institutions have that benefit of being around Olympic athletes, and in some cases, these elite youth athletes are bringing a training advantage to them. And then the PSAs, if you will, the prospective student athletes, those young kids that are wrestling with Olympians in some cases frequently, and being coached by the best. And I think the cool thing about the regional training centers that's most encourages me the most is, certainly we could talk a lot about the PJ Dukes and the Jax Forrest and the Luke Lilladals and those kids that have already accomplished some amazing things. But I think about the benefit that regional training centers bring to the kids that maybe from a rural high school that doesn't have any support, that now can go into a college program if they achieve a certain level of success, and maybe get an opportunity to wrestle at a Division III school or a Division II school. And it's just the water in the lake is rising, and all boats are benefiting. So it's really I use the word golden age of wrestling, and I'm pretty convinced we're in it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good point. And how instrumental has Jaden Cox been for you guys? As an age level coach, he strikes me as somebody who maybe before this era of those names you just mentioned, 10 years ago or more, he was a kid that was in like the NCAA finals as an 18-year-old kid, kind of almost equally unprecedented for his time. And now he's turning around and kind of helping kids around that same age group. So how big has he been?
Well, certainly Jaden Cox has helped elevate the significance and the importance of the relevancy of our age group world teams. Yeah. And I mean, he is still a household name in the sport, and it's cool to see him develop as a coach. And last year we won the U17, the U20 World Championships, and Joe Russell took the U23 team and won the team title with that team too. It's the first time that we've ever done that, and so that's a direct result of guys like Jaden Cox, and we are blessed with a pretty massive resource around our organization program. Obviously, elite coaches on the women's side with Jess Bunker and Cheney and Haight, but Jaden's just an absolute joy to have on our team here. And to be honest with you, and he'll be the first to admit, he's still learning a lot of stuff. And as we know, there's no guarantees that elite wrestlers make elite coaches. And I think the biggest hurdle that I've seen through my career is coaches being able to make that jump from being a incredibly selfish athlete. I don't mean that negatively by any stretch, but to be elite, there has to be some selfishness to getting what you need to do what you're trying to do, and to transition to be selfless. It's cool to see Jaden's been able to transition really well into that, and so we still have a lot to get accomplished with our EAP program here, and but I can assure you our age group world teams are in good shape. I joked with Jaden over the weekend, looking at some of those kids that were in the U20 tournament, thinking, heck, I could coach this team. But anyway, we're blessed by him, and he's had an impact for sure.
Yeah, and that segues nicely to my next question. You mentioned transitioning from being an athlete to a coach, and also being such a high level athlete, but there's still so much that you have to learn about coaching. It doesn't just automatically translate. Would you talk for a minute about the way the membership numbers are rising so much, and these brackets are huge at the U.S. Open, and there's so many kids out there wrestling at this high level. How do you guys continue to try to develop your coaches and your education program, and also the officials, like you kind of alluded to earlier? Like you said, as the water rises, the boats rise, but also there's the numbers keep rising, and you need more coaches, you need more officials, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's start with officials, and we were able to hire Stacy Davis, a former Olympic referee, to come to USA Wrestling, oversee our our officials program with a keen focus on growth and development. And I'm assure you today there are more resources available to people that and folks that want to referee than ever before. And we're really investing and focused on that. And it's easy to criticize referees. It's easy. I mean, we have, I think, 32 mats going in Vegas, and I'm sure there's tons of examples of situations where maybe the referee, didn't make the right call, but and it happens, and it's not making an excuse or saying it's okay. But I mean, we are very intentional with Stacy Davis's leadership here on our team of looking for ways to use technology to help further educate, to just elevate the importance of refereeing and encouraging and recruiting people to do it. Because I remember back in the day in the late '80s, early '90s, going to junior nationals and as the event director and just being amazed that a couple hundred people would take their entire year's vacation to come to Cedar Falls, Iowa, to get yelled by coaches for a week. And they're an amazing group. But we are putting resources into development and understanding that there has to be some additional investments made to get the very best out of our referees, because that's what the sport and our athletes deserve. I said during our officials meeting in Vegas that I thanked them for, I said, another flex by the USWA of covering the 6,000 entry tournament and doing a really good job with it. And but we gotta be better. And as Bruce Baumgart always says, wind could be at our back, but we still got to get better. And so that's the case with our referees. And on the coaching side, we're blessed by that school college infrastructure that exists with, I don't know, we're up to 11,000 varsity high school programs now, I think, and our membership is exploding. But we are investing in our coaches education program, and it's interesting that we're seeing a pull from, the athletes are actually helping us recruit to freestyle and Greco, because they're seeing and changing the relevance of wrestling. Freestyle used to be that that slogan that summer champions made winter, or summer wrestlers make winter champions. And anymore, I know that there's kids that their highest priority is to make a world team. And not that winning a high school state championship isn't important, but I say that because those are the kids, those high school wrestlers and college wrestlers. Those are that's the number one pool that we look to coach. And it's it's built into the culture of the sport, and it's just really one of the cool things about wrestling, where there's this significant culture of giving back. And I think you could not walk very far out in Vegas with in the U20 tournament and say, hey, what do you want to do when you're when you graduate from college, or when you're done wrestling? And there's a high percentage that I want to coach. And so we're that's not something that USA Wrestling created. It's a culture that's existed in our sport that we're trying to help develop and grow, but we're also blessed with the Coaches Association with NWCA and Mike Moyer and all that he does to support that school college coaching community, and the resources that they have available for their CEO leadership program is really good and impactful. And so there's a lot of hands in that, and certainly it's important though. There's pretty foundational pieces of the infrastructure as coaching and refereeing, and we know for sure that we can't even dream of having these tournaments grow to 10, 15,000 entries without coaches and referees.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I've ever in my life seen a bracket that had to go into the round of 256 or whatever that, I'm not even good enough at math to know what that next round is, but I'm getting a magnifying glass out to read those names. It's pretty incredible.
I think the 79 kilo had 180 some wrestlers in it.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
One or two more for you here, Rich, and we thank you again so much for your time. Looking at it from a fan perspective, and this is, when we were out in Paris at the Olympics, Brian made a really good analogy. He said, it would, anybody who, I guess I'll backtrack a little bit. Diehard wrestling fans are obviously following the Olympics. They're following the senior level. They're following the U15 and U17 and U20. But there's a lot of your average fans out there that are, they're tuned into the high school season maybe, or the NCAA season. And then, like I kind of alluded to earlier in the interview, there's kind of like a lull almost, and they're kind of back to, okay, get excited for the college preseason. But there is, and I've seen it firsthand this last calendar year working full-time with Win, but there is so much wrestling, incredible high level, the highest level wrestling going on from April all the way to September, October when the Worlds are. These fans, some of them who kind of maybe check out during that period or at least aren't fully engaged, Brian made the analogy, it's kind of like being a big high school and college football fan, but then just not paying attention to the NFL at all, where it's like that's the highest level of football that can be played in this country. So what would your message be to maybe fans out there or supporters that it's like, hey, you don't have to check out after March at the NCAAs and think, I can't wait till next November when the season starts. You got to follow these U15, these guys at Pan Ams, and these U17, U20 guys at Worlds, and these senior level tournaments. I mean, it's the best wrestling you can watch, the highest level.
Yeah, and I mean, fandom is important, and it's it elevates our sport. It ultimately was one of the foundational reasons why we were able to stay on the Olympic program, is that there is a worldwide relevancy of the sport at the highest level, and we can do a better job here domestically, but the NCAA Division I championships, obviously the Olympic Games we consider the crown jewel, but it's hard to argue that the NCAA Division I championships isn't one of the crown jewels, or is the crown jewel of the sport. And so we've been blessed of late to have now elite success at the age groups that is helping us. You were at the NCAA tournament, and it was awesome to hear the announcers and Brian and Jason. I mean, it seemed like every match they were introducing someone that was a Pan Am champ or a Pan Am team member, or fourth in Fargo or All-American in Fargo, and educating people of exactly what you're talking about, that hey, this is a year-round sport, and so I mean, building fandom isn't easy. Unlocking that idea of a wrestling fan that's at the NCAA Division I championships, being at the World Championships. I mean, when we host it, we like to think that that's easier, which we're going to be doing next fall in Vegas. But it's it's challenging, and we have. I mean, be remiss if I didn't say things like RAF, the Real American Freestyle, and that is, in my opinion, developing not only a deeper relationship with the wrestling fan into the international style, but also developing a new fan base. And we think that people that are attending these events are more of the fringe wrestling people. They're maybe MMA fans or WWE fans or UFC fans, and they're being exposed to wrestling, and we're seeing them get some traction. And so I mean, those things help. There's other leagues that are providing opportunity for people to compete, and to be honest with you, there is a compelling reason for people to care about ranking tournaments, to care about the Pan American Championships, because it builds towards what I said earlier is, in my opinion, the highest honor in the sport, and that's winning an Olympic gold medal. And we're unlocking those people and investing in communication and promotion and marketing around doing that. And it's not by chance that we have three pretty significant international events leading up to LA, and that being the Pan American Championships next week in Iowa, and which it's the who's who of American wrestling are going to be there, and and the U23 Worlds in the fall in Vegas, and then the granddaddy being the senior world championships, which would be the most significant qualifier for the world championships. But that's done intentional, not just to, hey, we think it gives us a better chance to win something. Certainly it does, and certainly that's part of the strategy is to provide home ice, if you will, for wrestlers in these really important events to have success, because there is a direct correlation. We know that to be true. But it also gives us an opportunity to change the relevance of the international styles to, I think the best wrestling fans in the world are U.S. fans. And, so it's something that we pay attention to. I can't say that we always have great success. We're building properties like Final X that has become, a spectator event. And, if you haven't been to Final X, the thing that's really unique about Final X is it doesn't beat people up. Even the NCAA Division I championships, wrestling until 11, 12 at night is, that's not user friendly. And, we determine they're either participatory events or spectator events, and the U.S. Open happens to be kind of both. But an event like Final X is a spectator event. It's you're not beating people up. It's a couple hours in the gym or in the arena and watching high level wrestling and being able to do some other things along with it, because the research tells you that once you get over a couple hours, it's hard to maintain an audience. And we think those kinds of events will ultimately be the draw that's going to draw those people in. And we're keen on working with people like the Real American Freestyle to help engage that fan base, because for guys like me and you, watching some of the matchups isn't that interesting for the aficionados, but man, it's bringing an audience, and it's I'm starting to like those matches too.
Yeah.
Not that I never liked them, but it's interesting for me now. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to change it, and we still respect the idea that the foundation of wrestling in this country is the school college community. That's where most of the experience comes from, and that's where the funnel is the widest. And we're keen on working with our state chapters, who are the unsung heroes in this whole thing, the USA Wrestling state chapters that are providing the opportunity for those kids to get into a club or get into a local tournament and provide an infrastructure that we can look at an athlete that steps on the mat for the first day of practice, that hey, we have a program that can take you to the top of the podium at the Olympic Games if you stick with it.
Yeah, that's perfectly again another perfect segue. The last question I wanted to ask you was, even myself being a club coach, help out a couple nights a week here locally, and probably one of the biggest questions I get asked by parents and kids alike is, when should I start freestyle and Greco? As if there's like this magic answer, and it's maybe different for every kid, but honestly, as I've gotten older and more experienced, my answer keeps, I feel like, getting younger and younger. Why not throw your hat in it from a very early age, especially when you go out to things like the U.S. Open and you see how young some of these kids are, and you can tell by watching them that they've been wrestling freestyle and Greco for a long time. They're very proficient at it and they have a lot of experience, you can tell. But my one big question would be just, what would be your message to kids, coaches, parents out there even from a young age? These kids get started wrestling maybe when they're in elementary school. Why not get started in freestyle and Greco at a young age?
Yeah, well, sometimes the word fun is, the antithesis of wrestling sometimes. And I think, that would be, and I've been asked that question before, and it's, I think I don't know that there's when you're, 7 years old and 6 months is when you should start becoming proficient in freestyle. And I think those experiences kind of come naturally. And it's, those elite coaches will all tell you, especially those elite coaches that are running these, professional clubs, that, making it fun for kids is how they can keep them engaged. And, sometimes developing freestyle skills, if you've just been working on folk style skills, is fun. And, wrestling Greco, when you're young it can be fun. And I think it's my advice to people wouldn't be so much as, hey, you need to do this as a just as a responsibility. But I mean, it's another offering that we know is effective for kids to be engaged in the sport. And right there, not by accident, that freshman class this year at the NC2As, every one of those kids are wickedly proficient in freestyle, and in some cases Greco too. So I think it's too much is placed on our youth sometimes in terms of like results and winning, and my son or daughter has to be a state champion when they're 6 or 7, or go to the national championships when they're and by the way, we're guilty of providing those opportunities, but ultimately at that age, it's way more important about being enjoyable for the kids. And I think introducing freestyle and Greco helps with that. And you never know when some youngster might develop a proficiency for Greco early, and that might be his path. And we've seen a lot of examples of kids athletes in the NCAA finals that have some Greco experience that we see a situation where a Greco move pays off for them. So it's the good ones are doing it and introducing them early and not shying away from it. I think it's another opportunity for us to inject some fun into the sport.
Yeah, and we talked to Tony Black a little bit out there in Vegas, and he mentioned, I think it's Wisconsin, maybe some other states too, that have implemented almost like a novice freestyle and Greco state tournament, which we thought was really cool, just because I think one of the biggest barriers for kids at a young age not doing it is because they lack the confidence in it, because they obviously haven't done it as long, or maybe don't feel confident they know the rules or whatever. But we just thought that was a really cool development that maybe other states will start to take and run with too.
Well, and it's there was a time where freestyle and folk style were very, very, very different, and there's still certainly a lot of pretty significant differences today. But we have an international federation now that isn't changing the rules every 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think that's enabled us to educate the coaching community. And I think even 10 years ago, you would talk to a high school coach that doesn't have a lot of experience with other than the folk style season. I have no idea where they reach in a bag and pull out a ball and what. And now we have rules that are good, and I think obviously there's differences, and certainly not want to get into an argument of what's better, because I love them both, by the way, or all three styles, but I think it's easier now, and I think it's one of the reasons why we're having such enormous success around participation in freestyle and Greco, because the rules are good, and coaches that might not in the past been very comfortable coaching freestyle now feel good about standing in the corner and helping their kids progress in the sport.
Yeah, absolutely, you're spot on. Well, Rich, we thank you again so much for joining us. Again, Executive Director of USA Wrestling, Rich Bender, has been named Win Magazine's and USA Wrestling Organization as a whole has won the 2026 Mike Chapman Impact Award for Win Magazine. So, Rich, we really thank you for taking the time to talk with us here, especially during the busiest point of your guys' season and in between some of these massive events that you guys have going on. But thank you again, and congratulations, and we'll look to see you here at one of these events soon.
Yeah, thanks, Tristan. I mean, speaking of impact, kudos to Win and all that you guys do, and your tireless efforts to elevate the sport of wrestling's making a difference. And man, we're proud and honored to partner with you, and really humbled by this recognition. And Rich Bender doesn't deserve it, but the sport does, and the organization does. And on behalf of our 50 state chapters, our elite clubs, the regional training centers, and the infrastructure that exists for the sport, thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Take care.
All right, we'll see ya.